I gotta admit, the end of the Fever Mercury game made me sit up for a second because it got a little spicy with Caitlin Clark having an interaction with Dewanna Bonner out on the middle of the floor, sort of waving her back to the bench.
To the right, behind the coach, coming out and jawing at Dewanna Bonner. Dewanna Bonner.
What happens when a veteran player picks a fight with the most talked about athlete in women's basketball? The September 2nd matchup between the Indiana Fever and Phoenix Mercury was supposed to be about playoff positioning, about two teams fighting for crucial wins as the regular season wound down. But with just a few words exchanged during a timeout, Dewanna Bonner inadvertently handed Caitlin Clark yet another viral moment that would dominate sports media for days. This wasn't just another on-court exchange. This was a case study in how modern sports narratives are written not just through athletic performance, but through confrontations that play out across social media platforms and highlight reels. The Mercury may have won the game that night, but in the court of public opinion, they suffered a catastrophic loss that would eclipse their on-court victory entirely.
Now, we all know that the Indiana Fever is trying to make a push for the playoffs. We've been getting mixed signals coming out about Caitlin coming back, about Caitlin being, somewhat ready to go. Then we got Stephanie White saying it's day-to-day again, basically. Well, I'm here to tell you, Caitlin Clark is not shying away from making headlines.
During a timeout in the second half of the September 2nd game between the Indiana Fever and Phoenix Mercury, cameras captured something far more interesting than routine gameplay. Caitlin Clark, who was sitting on Indiana's bench due to her ongoing recovery from a right groin injury, got up to apparently complain to a nearby official about a call. This was when Dewanna Bonner, who had been traded from the Fever to Mercury earlier in the season after playing just 9 games with Indiana, took notice and began chirping at her former teammate. The exchange escalated quickly, with Clark visibly waving Bonner away in a dismissive gesture that would soon become a viral meme across social media platforms. For hours after the game, speculation ran wild about what exactly had been said between the two players. The mystery was solved when a fan sitting courtside posted a video to social media that contained clear audio of the exchange. In the video, Clark can be heard yelling toward Bonner, "It's not a foul," followed by several repetitions of "It's not a foul," with increasing exasperation. While Bonner's exact words toward Clark weren't captured as clearly in the video, her aggressive posture and tone suggested she was challenging Clark's version of events, and perhaps questioning her right to even be arguing calls while not actively playing in the game. What's particularly fascinating about this exchange is what happened immediately afterward, or more accurately, what didn't happen. The officials standing nearby seemingly pretended not to notice the confrontation, maintaining what one observer called a statue-like presence despite the obvious tension between the players. This perceived indifference from the referees added fuel to the growing narrative that Clark consistently receives different treatment from officials compared to other players in the league. Meanwhile, Bonner's Phoenix Mercury teammates seemed to give her space to handle the exchange, neither intervening nor escalating the situation further, perhaps recognizing that this was personal between Bonner and Clark. To understand why this particular exchange carried so much weight, we need to rewind to the beginning of the 2025 WNBA season. Dewanna Bonner, a veteran wing player, had signed with the Indiana Fever amid much excitement about what she could bring to a young team led by Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston. The partnership was supposed to be mutually beneficial. Bonner would provide veteran leadership and scoring punch, while Fever would give her a platform to compete for another championship. Clark herself had publicly praised Bonner, even saying she wanted to win a ring for her, and highlighting how Bonner was nearing the top of the all-time WNBA scoring ranks. But after just 9 games with Indiana, things went south dramatically. Bonner sat out and reportedly demanded an exit from the team, ultimately landing with the Phoenix Mercury, and creating obvious bad blood between her and her former franchise.
At this point in time. But that interaction stood out to me for a couple of reasons. I mean, number one, obviously, is the history there, where Dewanna Bonner was on the Fever for a cup of coffee and then winds up on the Mercury. That before the season, Caitlin Clark said she wanted to win a ring for her, right? She said, I want to win for her. And Caitlin Clark went out of her way to also, shine light on how Dewanna Bonner had risen up to the top of, near the top of the all-time WNBA scoring ranks. And then,
From a Fever's perspective, Bonner's departure felt like abandonment of a project that was still in its developing stages. For Clark specifically, who had openly embraced playing with Bonner, the veteran's decision to leave may have felt particularly personal. This context explains why their on-court exchange carried undercurrents that went beyond basketball disagreements. This wasn't just two players from different teams having a momentary disagreement. This was a former teammate who had abruptly left Clark's team, now confronting her during a difficult season filled with injury challenges. The subtext of betrayal hanging over the interaction gave it additional weight that wasn't immediately apparent to casual observers watching the clip without this background knowledge. Meanwhile, Bonner's new team, the Phoenix Mercury, was enjoying a remarkably successful season despite the drama surrounding her acquisition. At 26-14, Phoenix had already clinched a playoff spot and was tied for second place with Las Vegas and Atlanta as the regular season entered its final stretch. Bonner herself was contributing significantly off the bench, scoring 19 points in the very game where the confrontation with Clark occurred, while shooting an efficient 6 of 11 from the field. This success story stood in stark contrast to Indiana's struggles, creating something of an underdog versus powerhouse narrative that further shaped how fans interpret the exchange between the two players. While the confrontation between Clark and Bonner would ultimately dominate headlines, the actual basketball game being played that night was compelling in its own right. The Phoenix Mercury ultimately defeated the Indiana Fever 85-79, extending their winning streak to 5 games and strengthening their position in the competitive WNBA playoff picture. The Mercury displayed balanced scoring with 5 players reaching double figures, led by Alyssa Thomas's 23 points, 9 rebounds, and 9 assists, a near triple-double performance that exemplified the team's unselfish style of play. For Indiana, Kelsey Mitchell carried the offensive load with 29 points and 5 three-pointers, while Lexi Hull added 18 points in what will become an overshadowed but impressive performance.
The most clutchest player on the damn team. I'm not just saying that just to say it. Lexi Hall stand on business when it's time to play.
The September 2nd game marked Caitlin Clark's 19th consecutive absence due to her right groin injury, with no clear timetable yet announced for her return. This extended absence has created significant challenges for the Fever, who have struggled to maintain consistency without their star player. Indiana's record fell to 21-20 with the loss to Phoenix, placing them 8th in the WNBA standings with just 3 regular season games remaining. The team's precarious position in the playoff race added additional tension to the game and likely contributed to the emotions that spilled over during the confrontation between Clark and Bonner. Every loss at this stage of the season carries heightened importance, and seeing a former teammate contribute to their defeat undoubtedly stung for Clark and the Fever organization. Beyond the personal drama, the game itself represented an intriguing strategic matchup between two teams with contrasting styles. Phoenix's ability to spread the scoring across multiple players, Thomas, 23, Bonner, 19, Sadis Abali, 13, Kalia Copper, 11, and Sammy Wickham, 10, highlighted their offensive versatility and depth. Indiana, by contrast, relied more heavily on individual scoring from Mitchell and Hull, with Aaliyah Boston contributing a well-rounded 11 points, 8 rebounds, and 7 assists. The Mercury's 10-0 run to close the first half, capped by Monique Akomakani's three-pointer with just 2.2 seconds remaining, demonstrated their ability to capitalize on momentum swings, a skill that would prove valuable throughout the game and especially in weathering the emotional storm created by the Bonner-Clark confrontation. Almost immediately after the confrontation between Clark and Bonner occurred, clips began circulating on social media platforms, particularly X, still commonly referred to as Twitter despite its official rebranding. The visual of Clark waving Bonner away with a dismissive hand gesture proved to be especially meme-worthy, with users creating countless variations featuring everything from popular culture references to political humor. This rapid memification of the moment ensured that it would reach far beyond a typical WNBA audience, penetrating mainstream internet culture in ways that basketball highlights rarely do. The hashtag Bonner Backfire began trending within hours of the game ending, with most posts siding overwhelmingly with Clark and mocking Bonner for what they perceived as a failed attempt to intimidate the superstar. While the overall sentiment on social media favored Clark, there were interesting nuances in how different segments of basketball fans responded to the incident. Fever fans understandably rallied behind their player, expressing frustration at what they saw as yet another example of Clark being targeted by opponents. Clark's broader fan base, which extends far beyond Indiana, seized on the incident as further evidence that their favorite player faces unprecedented scrutiny and hostility from established WNBA players. Even some Mercury fans expressed confusion about why Bonner had chosen to engage with a player who wasn't even actively participating in the game, questioning the veteran's judgment in picking this particular battle. The few defenders of Bonner's actions argued that she was simply displaying competitive fire that has defined her career, though these voices were largely drowned out by the pro-Clark chorus. The social media response to the Bonner-Clark confrontation demonstrated the immense power of Caitlin Clark's platform and the loyalty of her fan base. Despite not having played a game in nearly 2 months due to injury, Clark remains arguably the most discussed player in the WNBA, with any incident involving her guaranteed to generate outsized engagement. This reality represents both an opportunity and a challenge to the league. While Clark's presence drives unprecedented attention to the WNBA, it also creates something of an imbalance in how stories are covered and which players receive scrutiny. The Bonner incident exemplified this dynamic, as a relatively brief on-court exchange dominated discussion of what was otherwise an important game between playoff-bound teams. The confrontation between Bonner and Clark fits into a broader pattern that has emerged since Clark entered the league, the phenomenon of veteran players seemingly going out of their way to test or intimidate the rookie sensation. From hard fouls to verbal exchanges to physical confrontations, Clark has faced what many observers have characterized as excessive hazing from established players. This pattern has sparked debates about whether this represents healthy competition or something more problematic, gatekeeping behavior from veterans uncomfortable with the attention a newcomer is receiving. The incident with Bonner was particularly notable because Clark is now in her second season, suggesting that this dynamic isn't limited to her rookie year, but may persist throughout her career. The WNBA finds itself in a challenging position when it comes to handling incidents like the Bonner-Clark confrontation. On one hand, the league benefits tremendously from the attention Clark brings, increased ticket sales, higher television ratings, and greater social media engagement. On the other hand, the league must maintain a sense of competitive balance and avoid appearing to favor any individual player. This balancing act becomes especially difficult when officials appear to treat Clark differently, either by not protecting her from overly physical play or by not intervening in verbal exchanges like the one with Bonner. The league's seeming reluctance to address these issues head-on has created frustration among Clark's fans and likely confusion among more casual observers about the WNBA's standards for player conduct. Another layer to this story involves the question of whether female athletes face different expectations when it comes to on-court behavior and self-expression. Some commentators have argued that Clark receives criticism for behavior that will be celebrated as competitive fire in male athletes. The Bonner incident exemplifies this dynamic. Clark's dismissive wave toward Bonner was characterized by some as disrespectful, while others saw it as a justified response to unnecessary provocation. This debate touches on larger questions about gender norms in sports and how female athletes navigate the complex terrain of competition, self-expression, and public perception. The fact that this incident generated so much discussion beyond typical sports talking points illustrates how Clark's presence in the league has amplified these conversations. As the regular season enters its final games, the implications of this incident extend beyond mere drama to tangible competitive considerations. The Phoenix Mercury, 26-14, are positioned for a deep playoff run, currently tied for second place with Las Vegas and Atlanta. The Indiana Fever, 21-20, meanwhile, sit 8th in the standings, needing strong performances in their final 3 games to secure their playoff position. Should both teams make the postseason, there's potential for a rematch that would carry added intensity following the Bonner-Clark confrontation. Such a matchup would undoubtedly become one of the most watched WNBA playoff games in recent memory, demonstrating how personal narratives can drive audience engagement with the league. For the individuals involved, this incident has implications for how they're perceived by fans and remembered in league history. Dewanna Bonner, a veteran with an accomplished career, risks having this confrontation become an unfortunate footnote to her legacy, a moment of frustration that overshadowed her on-court contributions. Caitlin Clark, meanwhile, further solidifies her reputation as a player who thrives under pressure and dominates narratives even when not actively playing. The incident also brought well-deserved attention to Lexi Hull, whose 18-point performance of the Fever in that game demonstrated her development as a player who delivers when given opportunity. Sometimes overshadowed by bigger names, Hull's performance reminded observers that basketball remains ultimately about team success rather than individual dramas. The coverage of the Bonner-Clark confrontation illustrates how sports media has evolved in the social media age. Traditional game recap stories focus primarily on the final score and statistical leaders, while digital outlets and social media platforms highlighted the personal drama between the players. This divergence in coverage reflects the different priorities of various media platforms and their audiences. For traditional outlets, the game itself remains the primary story. For digital native publications and social media influencers, personal conflicts and viral moments often take precedence. Athletes like Clark and Bonner must navigate this complex media landscape, where any moment can become a story that extends far beyond sports coverage. What Dewanna Bonner initially saw as a moment to assert her veteran presence ultimately backfired in spectacular fashion. Instead of putting Caitlin Clark in her place, she handed the superstar another viral moment that would dominate the sports conversation for days. Instead of demonstrating her toughness, she became the latest example of veterans who seemingly can't handle the attention Clark receives. And instead of focusing on her team's important victory and their 5-game winning streak, the conversation became about a few seconds of confrontation that expose the underlying tensions simmering beneath the surface of the WNBA. The reality is that Caitlin Clark represents a new era for women's basketball, an era of unprecedented attention, financial investment, and cultural relevance. Some veterans have embraced this change, recognizing that a rising tide lifts all boats. Others have resisted, perhaps feeling that their years of dedication to building the league deserve more recognition. The Bonner-Clark confrontation crystallizes this tension between the old guard and the new reality, a reality where dismissive waves become memes, verbal exchanges become headlines, and basketball games become backdrop to personal dramas that play out across social media platforms. What's your take on this entire situation? Do you think Dewanna Bonner genuinely regretted the confrontation, or was this just competitive heat in the moment? And who do you believe ultimately won this exchange? Bonner, who got to have her say, or Clark, who once again controlled the narrative without even stepping on the court? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more breakdowns of the biggest moments in sports culture.